Welcome back to the DJ Mixtape. We're a brand new channel dedicated to DJ culture and electronic music. In today's tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at harmonic mixing and how DJs actually mix in key. So harmonic mixing, or mixing in key, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is the process of creating a DJ transition with two or more tracks where they fit together harmonically or tonally, and you don't get any of those rogue notes creeping in which makes your mix sound a bit unprofessional or jarring on the ear. And it's not actually a new concept. DJs have been mixing in key for a long time. You can date it back to kind of, the late disco or early house DJs who used to find the key of their tracks through playing along with them on a keyboard, and then they'd note down the key of that track on the record sleeve, which is probably an early example of actually categorizing your music into key. It's not the ideal solution though for DJs wanting to mix harmonically, because you've got to spend ages working out the key of each record, and then it'd be all well and good if you were playing your track at the tempo it was intended, but as soon as you started to speed it up or slow it down, the pitch would change and therefore the key. So it was limited back then, but this concept of harmonic mixing does date back, so it's not brand new. Today we're lucky because we've got loads of toys to help us with harmonic mixing, and the first big sort of step forward with it from the early days was when Pioneer brought out the CDJ. I can't remember which model it was, but it was the one that had the master tempo feature, and it was a massive game changer. It was very exciting because it meant you could play the record or the MP3 or the CD or whatever you were playing at the tempo that it was made at, at the key it was made at, and you could speed up the CD player or slow it down, and it would maintain the pitch of the record, which meant that your tracks stayed in the intended key that they were written in, which was great. And it's a little bit like the way Ableton Live works. You have samples that when they're speeded up or slowed down, they maintain their original pitch. So it's the same concept. Sometimes people refer to it as time stretching or that sort of thing. So that was the first kind of big leap forward for harmonic mixing. The second leap forward came with the introduction of key detection software, the most famous being Mixed in Key. And that meant that you could just run your entire music collection through the software, and it would actually tag your MP3 file with the key of the record. So that was the next big game changer. Now these two things, the ability to tag your entire collection like that and the ability to mix with a master tempo function, now perform the cornerstone really of modern DJing. A lot of the main DJs these days rely on those two things. So in a minute we're going to jump into what we call the Camelot wheel system, which we'll explain to you more about in a sec. But if you want to work along and you haven't got any of this key detection software, you can either get Mixed in Key. Don't run out and buy Mixed in Key because you may have Traktor, Serato or Record Box. Any of the big kind of players, they all seem to have key detection integration within their software now. So as I said, don't run out and buy anything. Check with the stuff that you have to see if it has any key detection first. So here we are inside the Camelot wheel system. At this point you should have your record collection tagged harmonically, so your files should all be tagged with either a 4A or the more traditional system of F minor, or maybe even both. It doesn't really matter too much which you're using. The numerical system is a bit easier to use in this scenario, but don't worry, you can use either. So what's going on here then? We can see everything in the middle is tagged with an A, and everything on the outside is tagged with a B. Everything in the middle, all the tracks that are tagged with an A, mean they're in a minor scale and will sound a bit sadder. Everything on the outside is in a B and is in a major scale, and it will sound a bit happier. So let's take a look at 9A. You might have a track that's been tagged 9A, which means it's in the key of E minor. So that track will contain some or all of the notes associated with E minor. And likewise, 10A will contain all or some of the notes of B minor. So what does this mean for us? Well, say we're DJing, we're playing a tune that we know is in E minor. We need to know what's available to us to mix in and create our next transition. So how do we know which tracks we can pick? Well, we know that all the other tracks in your collection that have been tagged with 9A or E minor will contain some or all of the notes in that scale. So we know harmonically all of the notes in both of those tracks that are tagged with 9A will work together because it doesn't contain any notes outside of that key. What happens if we move up one to B minor? Well, everything in B minor, every track that's been tagged with B minor or 10A will contain exactly the same notes as E minor, barring one. So there'll be one note outside of that scale. And likewise, A minor, 8A, will contain all of the same notes as E minor, barring one. Okay, so harmonically, they're going to be fairly similar. So you could, in theory, choose a tune that's either one step up or one step down. What happens if we go two steps up? Well, everything in F sharp minor or 11A is going to include all of the same notes as E minor, barring 2. So it's going to be harmonically less likely than B minor. Likewise, if we go up to D flat minor, it's going to contain all of the same notes, barring 4. So pretty much half the notes will be out. So you can see the further round we go the wheel, the more unlikely the tunes are going to fit harmonically with the tune we're trying to mix out of. So as a rule of thumb on the Camelot wheel, we can go one step either side or one step in front. Now, G major actually contains all of the same notes as E minor. The only difference between G major and E minor is the relationship between those notes in the scale is different, and that's what actually gives us our major and minor sound of our track, is the relationship of the notes rather than the actual notes themselves. Don't worry if that's a bit confusing, you don't really need to know that, but that's why those two will work together. And also if we're working, for example, we've got a track that we're playing in 10B, D major, we can go one step either side or one step in front to B minor. So it works wherever you are on the wheel, whatever key you're in, it's either side or in front. Now that's the really basic interpretation of the Camelot wheel system. There are some sort of more advanced tricks you can play with it, with which include energy boosts, raising your mix by 2 to one side. It's argued that gives you an extra lift in energy in your mix. If you go onto the Mixed in Key website, which is exactly here, it has got some tips from some of the pros on using the Camelot wheel. So if you're really interested in this and you want to get a bit more advanced with it, we don't have time to go into that right now, but head on over to the Mixed in Key website and they've got some really good tips from the top guys and girls. So just before we go back to our home page, it's worth remembering that with harmonic mixing, use your ears, use this wheel as a reference to reference the relationship between the tracks in your collection, but please do use your ears. Just because you've got 2 tracks in E flat minor doesn't mean they're necessarily going to mix. They might fit together harmonically and they might be the same tempo, but it doesn't mean they're going to mix in your DJ transition. So use your ears. There's no substitute for knowing your record collection and knowing the arrangements of those individual records within your record collection. This should just be used as a guideline, and it is a really good aid. It's a good help for harmonic mixing. Otherwise, we'd be back in the dark ages with a keyboard again. So this is fantastic, and I'm not understating the importance of the Camelot wheel. I just think it's also important to use your ears, which is why I just think it's crazy when I see these guys DJing with no headphones and they're just relying on what they see on the display. I just think that's crazy, and I can't relate to that. So yeah, that's just my words of wisdom. One more nuance that I thought I'd just pinpoint before we finish is that sometimes you'll be working in a tune, say again, for example, E flat minor. That record might only contain 3 notes from E flat minor. It might be a really minimal, stripped down kind of record. If that's the case, that record is going to stand more chance of being able to mix with tracks outside of its key, maybe quite far around the wheel, because the likelihood that the notes, those 3 notes, are going to clash with a different track are diminished because there's less notes to clash, right? If you're playing a pop song that's using the full scale of notes within that key, then the likelihood of it clashing with something outside of the key is going to be much greater. So that's something to bear in mind as well. I often find that this major minor mixing does throw up some really great results, but it also can sound a bit weird. So again, be careful with the major minor. Remember, you can't go diagonally. That almost always doesn't work. And yet, play around with it. Again, when I said use your ears, there's no reason why something in E flat minor won't work over here. Sometimes you get some really interesting kind of dissonant results in your mixing. So yeah, experiment and play around with it. So there we go, that wraps up things for today. Please let us know in the comments if there's anything you'd like us to feature in our tutorials, and we'll try our best to do that for you. Please like the video if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see you again soon on the DJ Mixtape. Goodbye.